Sometimes the world will balance itself, and sometimes arrogance will collapse under its own weight. But when you live your life with patience, integrity, and care, you don't just win, you thrive. In the end, hey everyone, before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss any of the wild stories I bring you every week. Trust me, this one is insane. It's about betrayal, rumors, power trips, and one very satisfying revenge. I worked at a home improvement store for nearly a decade. 8 years of my life. 8 years spent surrounded by the smell of paint, the cold steel of tools, the endless chatter of co-workers. The first 7 years were in North Carolina, a place I thought I'd settle into, but life had other plans. I moved north to be closer to my best friend and her husband. They were expecting my first godchild, and I didn't hesitate for a second. Family has always been my anchor, and this was no exception. I transferred to a local store and threw myself into work, eager to make a mark in a new environment. I started in the garden department. There's something almost soothing about it. Pots lined up, flowers arranged in neat rows, the smell of fresh soil under your nails. I loved it at first. But I quickly realized that this store had serious staffing problems. Managers seemed overworked, schedules chaotic, and employees shuffled from one department to another at a moment's notice. I didn't mind helping where I was needed, but I began to notice a troubling pattern. You see, my old HR had dropped the ball. Somehow they had marked me as a part-time employee. The new store assumed that's what I wanted. I already had a part-time overnight job at a gym to make ends meet, so I just went along, asking repeatedly for full-time hours at the main store. For months I got vague answers and empty promises. Nothing changed, and then my goddaughter was born. She wasn't just a baby to me, she became family. I spent countless hours babysitting, taking time off when needed, and sharing stories and pictures with co-workers. I talked about her constantly because she was the happiest, most remarkable part of my life. People who truly cared smiled along with me. Those who didn't, well, that would become painfully clear. About 6 months after moving, I had started to build a reputation. I wasn't the guy with dozens of friends, but I was respected. People knew I would show up, do the work, and help anyone who asked. Then the new assistant manager arrived. And from the first day, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. She was abrasive. She demanded her way, and she had a knack for cruelty that made even the smallest mistakes feel catastrophic. The first time I heard about her style, a front desk employee had been fired over a Playboy tag on her jacket. Let that sink in, a Playboy tag. She had been dismissed immediately, without warning, without a conversation. It was outrageous. Myself and a few other employees organized a walkout in protest. And somehow it worked. The store manager reversed the firing. But this wasn't the first time we had to stand up against management. A previous ASM had made sexist comments about a cashier, and we had walked out then too. It was becoming a pattern. Powerful employees who thought they could bully their way through the store, and a team that refused to let it happen. Eventually, I finally got full-time hours in receiving, paired with a supervisor who had the patience of a saint and the temper of a volcano. Working with him was difficult enough, but my real challenge was balancing my personal life. Babysitting my goddaughter became a part of my routine, and while it wasn't a problem for me, it seemed to rub certain people the wrong way. Rumors began to circulate. Malicious rumors. Somebody started whispering that my goddaughter wasn't really my goddaughter, but my child. My love child, as I would later see in a text. It was absurd, offensive, and utterly false. But in a place where gossip spreads like wildfire, it took root. I had my suspicions about who had started it, and I didn't have to guess long. The ASM had a history of making disparaging comments about men taking care of children. The holidays were approaching, and I asked for Thanksgiving and Christmas off, months in advance. Normally I'd get these days without issue. But suddenly they were canceled without explanation. Strike one, then COVID hit again. My supervisor tested positive, and per company rules, I had to self-isolate until I could get tested. Finding a testing site was a nightmare. A week passed while I scrambled to get a test, all the while bombarded with calls and texts, pressured to return immediately. I had to tell friends, family, and roommates that I had been exposed, risking their plans and holiday travel. Strike two. Thankfully, my test was negative. But winter wasn't done with me. A massive snow and ice storm hit. Roads were treacherous, but I managed to get to work safely. Then disaster struck my friend's family. Her husband was injured in a car accident, their power went out, and their infant needed care. I was the only one with a vehicle and the means to help. I called out from work each day, explaining it was a family emergency. And each day, management hounded me, ignoring the danger, ignoring the responsibility I had to protect a family in crisis. Strike three. I had reached my breaking point. That Sunday early in the morning, I walked into the store, handed HR my resignation letter, and left. Immediate resignation, at will state, no regrets. My supervisor confronted me, angry and desperate, but I ignored him. I just wanted to sleep, to breathe, to escape. And then, hours later, the spark of my accidental revenge arrived. A single text from my ASM. We will see how long you can take care of your love child without us. Love child. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. She had made herself my enemy, underestimated me, and overstepped in ways she would soon regret. I began gathering every scrap of evidence. Texts, call records, messages, anything that could expose her. If she wanted a war, I would give her the battlefield, and she wouldn't even know she had lost until it was too late. The text from the ASM sat on my phone like a ticking time bomb. Love child. She had chosen her words carefully, meant to sting, meant to provoke, but she didn't know me, or the circle of people around me who could verify the truth. I spent the next few days quietly collecting evidence. Every unreasonable demand, every harassing text, every call pressuring me to come into work during holidays or a pandemic, I saved it all. I documented dates, times, and witnesses. I reached out to coworkers I trusted, quietly asking them to share what they had seen. There was a surprising number who were willing to speak up, who had grown tired of her tactics but were too afraid to confront her directly. The ASM had made herself the center of attention in ways most people hadn't noticed. She demanded overtime but punished those who refused. She spread rumors about employees, sowing distrust and fear. She was constantly threatening people subtly, trying to control their lives and ours. And now she had done the unthinkable, attacked something sacred to me, my goddaughter. I wasn't going to react rashly. I wasn't going to yell or confront her in the middle of the store. The bigger the audience, the more control she had. Patience, I reminded myself. Patience, and the truth would do the work. And then the dominoes began to tip. First came the management review. My former ASM, confident as ever, walked into the meeting room ready to assert her authority. She had no idea that HR already had my resignation letter, nor that murmurs of revolt had quietly begun to spread through the departments. She strode in like a queen ready to rule her kingdom. I have called this meeting to discuss the abandonment and immorality of my name, she announced. Her words cut the room sharply, meant to intimidate, meant to shame. A few people in the room flinched, but many had been quietly preparing for this moment for months. Then, like a lightning bolt, my former supervisor, usually quiet, careful, the one people feared crossing, stood up. His voice was calm, yet carried an undeniable authority. No, that is not true. He resigned. He left on his own terms. And your behavior here today, this intimidation, these false claims, is exactly why morale is collapsing in this store. I wish I could describe the look on her face. Disbelief, panic, desperation. She tried to regain control, tried to fire him on the spot, but she was alone. HR had the resignation letter, and for the first time the people around her began to speak up. Enough, one of the senior cashiers said, her voice trembling but resolute. We've all had enough of this. And then the floodgates opened. The appliances team quit first, leaving the department empty. Garden followed, with their manager quietly negotiating a move to a competitor weeks before the events unfolded. The front desk walked out, protesting the threats she had made against Muslim employees wearing headscarves. Lumber, pro desk, cashiers, all departments began leaving. It wasn't just a few people standing up. It was a tidal wave of truth, frustration, and pent-up anger finally breaking through the dam she had built. The ops manager, having already seen the rot, quit before the district manager arrived. Taking HR and my former supervisor with him, the ASM was left standing, shocked, helpless, realizing too late that her kingdom had crumbled. And according to the stories I received from friends still at the store, she sprinted to her car as the district team arrived, completely blindsided by the chaos she had caused. It was beautiful in a quiet, almost cinematic way, the arrogance that had ruled the store for months collapsing in real time. I never had to confront her. I never had to argue or yell. Her own arrogance, her own cruelty, and the seeds of fear she had planted in others had done all the work for me. I had simply stayed patient, documented the truth, and let the world catch up to her. Meanwhile, I began to rebuild my own life. I had a full-time position at the gym waiting for me, one where no one demanded my soul or my free time. I started sleeping through the night again. I spent long, carefree hours with my goddaughter, laughing, teaching her, watching her grow without the shadow of rumors or toxic management looming over us. And yet, even with all that peace, I couldn't help but smile at the chaos that had unfolded at the store. Watching from a distance, hearing the stories, knowing the chain reaction I had indirectly triggered, it was deeply satisfying. It wasn't about revenge in the dramatic, cinematic sense. It wasn't about shouting or confrontation. It was about truth, patience, and letting someone's arrogance lead them to their own downfall. And in this case, the lesson had been delivered loud and clear. I remember one particular story from a friend. The front desk employees had staged a peaceful walkout, holding each other's hands, stepping out together, refusing to let the ASM intimidate them any longer. The garden department manager had already secured new positions for himself and his team. And every time the ASM tried to assert her authority, she found empty chairs, blank stares, or people recording every word as evidence. By the end of the week, the store had become almost unrecognizable. Departments decimated, morale shattered. Corporate had to intervene. And at the center of it all, the ASM realized the power she had thought she held was an illusion. Meanwhile, I was living my life. I didn't need the satisfaction of confrontation. I had something better. Peace, freedom, time with family, sleep, and the knowledge that I had handled the situation not with anger, but with careful planning, patience, and truth. The irony wasn't lost on me. All of her threats, all of her manipulations, all of her attempts to control people had backfired spectacularly, and I had played my part quietly, indirectly, letting the truth speak louder than any confrontation ever could. That's when it hit me. Sometimes revenge isn't about action. It's about preparation, patience, and letting people reveal themselves for who they truly are. And when they do, the universe tends to handle the rest. After the storm had passed, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. The ASM, once the untouchable authority in the store, was gone. Departments had crumbled, managers had resigned, and employees who had long felt trapped under her thumb were finally free. Her reign of terror, built on fear, manipulation, and petty cruelty, had imploded spectacularly. Friends who remained at the store reached out to me with updates, each story more astonishing than the last. The front desk employees had staged a peaceful walkout, united against the harassment and intimidation they had endured. The garden department manager had been quietly negotiating moves to a competitor, ensuring his team could leave with dignity and security. Even the ops manager and the HR rep had walked out on principle, refusing to continue serving under such toxic leadership. Word spread quickly through corporate channels. Complaints of harassment, discrimination, and intimidation had flooded the district office. Families of employees who had been threatened were consulting lawyers, and corporate HR was forced to act. The ASM, who had once wielded her power like a weapon, was now scrambling to cover the damage she had caused. And I was watching from a safe distance, quietly savoring the fallout without ever stepping into the fray. I didn't need to confront her directly. My part had been played with patience, evidence, and careful documentation. She had done the rest herself. Life outside the chaos was a breath of fresh air. My full-time position at the gym offered stability and respect, without endless demands or toxic interference. Sleep became a luxury I no longer had to fight for. More importantly, I was spending uninterrupted time with my goddaughter. I watched her grow, laugh, and explore the world without the cloud of rumors or manipulation hanging over her. The satisfaction of seeing the ASM's downfall unfold was immense, but not in a petty way. It was a quiet, almost cinematic kind of justice. I imagined her sprinting to her car, realizing that the authority she had clung to so desperately was an illusion, that her manipulation had backfired, and that the people she had tried to control had simply walked away from her tyranny. It was a lesson in patience and timing. Revenge isn't always immediate. It doesn't need dramatic confrontation or heated arguments. Sometimes the best revenge is truth, carefully documented, left to unfold naturally. Arrogance, after all, tends to collapse under its own weight. As I reflected, I realized something deeper. This story wasn't just about the ASM or the store. It was about boundaries, respect, and standing up for yourself in ways that preserve your dignity. I had spent nearly a decade dedicated to a job, giving my time, energy, and loyalty. And yet, when I asked for fairness, when I followed the rules, the system failed me. The ASM thrived on fear, rumors, and control, but in the end, those very traits destroyed her. I had learned that the real power lies not in domination, but in patience, preparation, and integrity. I didn't need to orchestrate her downfall. I simply needed to document the truth, protect the people I loved, and let the natural consequences of her arrogance unfold. There were small, quiet victories along the way that brought immense satisfaction. Friends told me about the shocked faces, the whispered conversations, and the empty desks that greeted her as the departments walked out. Every act of rebellion, no matter how small, contributed to a wave of accountability that even corporate couldn't ignore. And the emotional closure? That came from my goddaughter. Every laugh, every milestone, every moment we shared, free from rumor and harassment, reminded me why I had fought. Not for revenge, but for protection, for love, and for dignity. Looking back, I can say with certainty revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent, sometimes it's patient, sometimes it's letting someone reveal themselves for who they truly are and letting the consequences unfold naturally. And sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, surrounded by the people you love, without ever having to step back into the toxicity that tried to ensnare you. I sleep easily now. I spend my time with family, with friends, with the people who truly matter. And every time I see my goddaughter smile, I remember why patience and truth are more powerful than anger or confrontation. Some victories aren't flashy. They're quiet. They're enduring. And they leave you with a profound sense of satisfaction that no fleeting moment of drama could ever match. So, if there's one takeaway from my story, it's this: stand your ground, document your truth, and protect the people who matter most. The world has a way of correcting itself if you let it. And sometimes, arrogance has a way of collapsing spectacularly, all on its own. Even after the store had emptied and the ASM's reign had ended, the memories of her abuse were sharp, almost surreal. I kept thinking back to all the little ways she tried to control people, subtle, mean-spirited, and often utterly ridiculous. There was the time she berated a cashier for being too cheerful while ringing up customers, claiming it made the customers uncomfortable, or when she demanded that the ProDesk manager check his work multiple times, only to contradict him after each correction, as if she had some personal vendetta against efficiency. Every action was designed to remind us all that she had power and we didn't. My friends at the store told me their stories too. The front desk had a part-timer, a young Muslim woman, who was terrified to wear her headscarf because the ASM had made vague threats about cutting hours. The employees didn't need me to see the text. The fear was palpable. And yet when the walkout happened, they held each other's hands, stepped out together, and reclaimed their dignity. The courage in that moment wasn't mine, it was theirs. The garden department had been simmering with resentment for months. Their manager had been quietly negotiating with a competitor, ready to take the team with him when the time was right. When the ASM attempted to push them into working a weekend shift during a blizzard, they quietly refused. And when the dominoes started to fall, they left together, showing solidarity and planning for the future. Even my supervisor, normally quiet and reserved, had stood up in a way that shocked everyone, including the ASM herself. He didn't just defend me, he defended fairness, decency, and the idea that no employee should live under constant fear. And when she tried to fire him on the spot, he walked out on principle, carrying the respect of the staff with him. I remember hearing from a friend that the ASM tried to salvage her dignity as the district manager arrived, attempting to explain herself. But she was met with empty desks, whispers of evidence, and the unmistakable realization that she had misjudged the people around her completely. It was almost cinematic, the empire she had built, crumbling as quickly as she had tried to construct it. Meanwhile, life outside the store was healing and rewarding. My goddaughter became a source of joy and grounding. I watched her discover new things every day. Her first steps, her first words, the first time she laughed so hard she nearly fell over. These weren't just milestones. They were reminders of why I had fought the fight the way I did. There were funny moments too, like the time I tried to teach her how to dance in the living room, only for her to grab my phone and start filming me instead. Or when we attempted to bake cookies and she decided the flour was much better on the floor than in the mixing bowl. Moments like these reminded me that life outside toxic workplaces can be chaotic in the best possible way. Looking back, I realized the story wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming time, energy, and respect. 8 years of my life had been dedicated to a job, and I had given more than my fair share. But when push came to shove, I didn't just leave. I left strategically. I protected the people I loved, collected evidence, and let the consequences unfold naturally. The ASM's downfall was dramatic, yes, but it wasn't my drama that made it happen. It was the truth, the patience of those around her, and her own arrogance. Watching her attempt to control the narrative, only to have the world ignore her and side with fairness, was deeply satisfying. And the best part? I got to enjoy life, free from toxicity, while the store cleaned up the mess she had created. The story left a lasting impression on me. I learned that patience can be a weapon, truth can be unstoppable, and arrogance is often its own undoing. More importantly, I learned that protecting the people who matter, friends, family, godchildren, is worth more than any promotion, any paycheck, or any temporary sense of power. I sleep easily now. I laugh freely. I spend time with my goddaughter without the shadow of rumors or intimidation hanging over us. And every time I see her smile, I remember that life isn't about controlling others. It's about nurturing, protecting, and cherishing the moments and people that truly matter. If there's one lesson I hope people take from my story, it's this. Stand your ground, document the truth, and protect what you love. Sometimes the world will balance itself, and sometimes arrogance will collapse under its own weight. But when you live your life with patience, integrity, and care, you don't just win, you thrive. In the end, that's all any of us can really hope for. Peace, love, and the knowledge that we've done the right thing, not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of integrity. And when that happens, sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't revenge at all. It's life lived well. Thank you for being there. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell for more interesting Reddit revenge stories.